Alright, so I got to see The Batman early on the 1st of March, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. There are some perks to living abroad, and currently in South Korea, the movie came out a few days earlier than most countries in the West. So, yeah, this is my review of Batman, non-spoiler. Welcome to Sam's Cup of Tea. Sam's Cup of Tea. Sam's Cup of Tea. I'm a big fan of Batman. I love Tim Burton's Batman, the first one with Michael Keaton. I loved Dark Knight. Christopher Nolan's approach to it, I thought it was just, gritty and dark. And I've really been craving a Batman that's dark and gritty, just to contrast what's been going on with Marvel, all the colourful, CGI-heavy kind of stuff. And I was really excited to see what they would do. And the more I've seen of the Batman in trailers and in kind of, interviews and, just the more I've heard about the movie, the more I've liked what I've seen. When it was first announced, I was a bit like, oh, God, what they're going to do with it. Robert Pattinson obviously was picked to be Batman. And I'm a big fan of Robert Pattinson. I think his choices, his performances in the last, almost 5-10 years has been great, ever since the Twilight movies, of course. Obviously, Matt Reeves has been at the helm directing this. And, he did a great job with the Planet of the Apes trilogy. They weren't my favourite movies. I actually got a little bit bored in places, but they are really well-made movies and people love them. So I do rate him highly. And from just the visual stuff and how they were going thematically from the trailers, I really liked what I saw. That sort of gritty, David Fincher-esque Seven-inspired feel with the Kurt Cobain theme tune, the kind of grunge. I liked that. And the trailers were really, really promising. So overall, I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. From the moment it started, it has a very strong identity and it knows what it wants to do. It's a long film, it's almost 3 hours. And I've seen other people say that it felt like 2 hours. It does, but there are points where it does not drag. It never drags, but it's just long. And there were times in the cinema I was like, whoa, this is long, right? But none of it is bad. There isn't really any slow parts or anything that I was like, oh, they could get rid of this. I wanted to go for a toilet break for a long time, but I just never found the right opportune moment because it felt like I was going to miss something important. So, firstly, the design of Gotham is really well done. The representation of Gotham is like what you've seen in Seven. The heavy rain, the dark streets, the sort of grime. And it really suits, Gotham and what you think of Gotham. One of my big complaints with, I wouldn't say big complaints, but one of my complaints with Christopher Nolan's movies, and I love his Batman movies, I'm not bashing on him at all. But what I will say is, especially with Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, the second and the third, sometimes it felt a little bit like he was just shooting Chicago and New York, and it just looked like New York or Chicago. It didn't look like Gotham. And sometimes Batman, who is quite a sort of out there character, sometimes didn't quite fit. It didn't quite fit the sleek streets of Chicago, the walkways, the nice buildings. And what I loved about this one was they go to such a great effort to sort of, they do film, obviously shots in Chicago and New York, it looks like, and even they've used locations in England and Scotland, but there's a lot of really sort of gothic kind of architecture mixed into that, and a lot of the interiors are deliberately in that vein. And so Batman and the Riddler and all these characters, they really fit the scenery, right? Robert Pattinson's Batman really, really sort of blends into the environment in a really cohesive way. And I was really impressed with the world building that they made in that way, aesthetically, to start with. But it's not just aesthetically, it's the way that this movie really feels like a complicated cesspool of corruption and politics and all these things, because the movie is very noir-like. So at the beginning, we get the introduction to him. I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but we get introduced to Batman. He's been Batman for 2 years, so we don't have to go through all that origin story. And there are things this movie does that other movies have done with Batman, you know, showing the light, you know, the Batman signal. But it's the way in which it's done, the way in which it conveys how he makes his enemies afraid and all this lot. It's really, really clever, and it knows what it wants. The world building's great. The casting is fantastic. Robert Pattinson, to begin with, is a great, great Batman and a great Bruce Wayne. He's a sort of angry, hasn't got to grips with himself version. You know, he's still raw and he's angry, right? And it's very entertaining to see that sort of Batman. You know, he's a little bit broken, and throughout this movie he learns what kind of Batman he needs to be for Gotham. He's different to the other Batman. He's different to Christian Bale, he's different to Ben Affleck, he's different to Michael Keaton. He's got his own he's found his own niche, which isn't too dramatically different, but it's distinct enough. There's a sort of sense in which he sort of walks in like almost like the Terminator, you know, from the shadows, but you're never sure where he's going to come from, and he's got a very menacing sort of presence, you know. And we also have Catwoman, who's played by Zoe Kravitz, and she's brilliant in this. It's very organic the way this feels. Even though she is Catwoman, she's got a suit, it sort of never feels out of place in this universe, and a lot of the characters don't. It's very clever how they make this world, because they make a world that feels very grounded in reality and very gritty, but not too comic booky in the sense of unrealistic, but it's sort of just a slight skew to like in an odd direction that the characters really fit into the world. So she's sort of, you know, she's got her own suit that she's made, and she plays a really important role in this, and she's great in it. Her fight scenes, her story, her backstory, the relationship she has with Batman, their interactions, just fantastic. So she's great also. Obviously, Paul Dano is the infamous Riddler in this, and he just knocks it out of the park. It's not too similar to the Joker. He does his own thing, and he's menacing, and he's unhinged, and it's just everything you want in a Batman villain. It's just brilliant. Colin Farrell obviously plays the Penguin, and he's also fantastic. I mean, the makeup is some of the best I've ever seen. It doesn't look like prosthetics. He's unrecognisable. And also his performance as the Penguin just fits right into Gotham and just a sleazebag. And you kind of love to hate him in this. It's just great. And obviously we have Jeffrey Wright, who plays Commissioner Gordon, Jim Gordon. He's brilliant. And all the cops and the way that they look, it's just all feels very Batman and Gotham and very authentic. And of course we have Andy Serkis playing Alfred, who's brilliant also. Everybody in this film fulfills their role and does it really well. It feels like they knew exactly the types of characters they wanted, and they did it really, really well. Another thing what I will say is the cinematography is fantastic in this. There are some shots that are so beautiful. There aren't really any points at which there is bad CGI or an overuse of CGI. It seems like they use a lot of natural light. It's a very dark film. It's a very tonally dark film. If you want to know, like Seven, David Fincher, if you know those, that's the tone of this film throughout. But it's consistent and it looks beautiful. Some shots are just fantastic. There are many set pieces in this film. Like coming out of this film, if you go into this film and you want to see a bit of action, a bit of Batman solving crimes, how he uses his gadgets, all of that is in this. Car chase in this. You know, menacing villain, it's in this. It's got everything, this film. You don't come away from this film feeling like, I could have done with another fight scene. There are many set piece fight scenes that all make sense to the story. They're not just in there for the sake of it. it really makes sense. Right at the beginning, you get a really great sort of action scene, and it's just fantastic. The way that they have Batman fighting and moving, and the way he uses himself, his armor, it just works. It reminds me of the other films. It reminds me of the games, the Arkham games. It's just so satisfying to watch. The choreography is brilliant. He really looks powerful, and it's just great. It's hard to go into too much detail. Also, a thing I really liked about this movie is that it really leans into the sort of crime thriller noir, the solving of crimes. It's not just him going around beating people up. He's going to crime scenes, and there are riddles to solve, and there's evidence, and you really get to see how Batman interacts with the police, like Jim Gordon, to figure out what's going on. And it's kind of following these breadcrumbs that the Riddler is leaving that also opens up Gotham to you, the viewer, and also to Bruce Wayne and Batman himself. So you learn about the world through this kind of figuring out, and it's fascinating. It really is fascinating, and it's very satisfying to see that there are various obstacles or plot points that are set up and resolved in this film. It isn't just the Riddler. It isn't just something else. It's a bunch of things. So that gets us into the length and obviously what's covered. So it is a long film. It's very, very long, and there are points where you feel like, whoa, is that, like, I feel like that was the pinnacle, but we still got this to deal with, we've still got this, and it does feel long. But by the end, I was sort of glad that they committed to it, because it feels like it really builds a world out, and it doesn't just leave it there. There is more to come, obviously, in the future. It looks like it's left for more to come, but there's enough in this to be, everything that's set up feels like it's resolved in a lot of ways, which is satisfying. But for some people, I imagine it will be a bit long. The music is fantastic. Michael Giacchino, obviously Batman is very famous, and it's always about, like, what's the theme going to be? We had Hans Zimmer in The Dark Knight, Danny Elfman, obviously famous score for the Tim Burton movies. So what is Michael Giacchino going to do? And he knocks it out of the park. He really does. It's different to other ones, but it's also similar. But it's not just the theme, which is played a lot throughout the movie. There are some really, really great flourishes of music that add to the drama and almost the fear of Batman, the kind of the menace of him, and also of the Riddler and of Gotham. It's a very present score, and it has elements of Hans Zimmer, and it has elements of Danny Elfman, and it has elements of something new. The kind of the rising sort of Hans Zimmer-esque crescendo theme, the very bold theme where it's like it just picks a few notes and hammers them home and builds them up. But it also has that kind of Danny Elfman-esque trumpet heavy stuff, even sometimes a little bit Elliot Goldenthal, who's done a lot for David Fincher, so it has that Fincher-esque thing, but it does very much remind me of Seven, and I'm a big fan of Seven and David Fincher, so it's very dark in tone, and some points it does feel quite oppressive. But I think that's the point, right? That's what we want. We want Gotham to sort of feel like that. So, in a way, it's good. So yeah, I loved the story. I loved the world building. I loved the cast. I loved Batman himself. I thought there were really interesting innovations in his character, in his gadgets, how he uses them. I liked how the technology that he uses is sort of, you can see that he's made it himself. It's sophisticated, but it's also a bit rugged. And there's a great message to this as well. The music's fantastic. The cinematography, everything is there. The only criticism that I have two small criticisms. The first one is obviously, like I said, the length. I'm glad that it is this long, but you do start to feel the length. It is a bit long. But I don't know how that might factor in once it's been released on... I remember sitting there in the cinema and thinking, this movie could do with an intermission. Like, if there was an intermission halfway through, it would be great. And that's, of course, something that you can do at home. You can pause it, you can go make a cup of tea, you can have a chat, then you can carry it on. Because start to finish, this is quite a bit of a marathon. But I wouldn't say this is a deal breaker. And the only other criticism that I have is that, for me, the movie lacked emotion a little bit. It made me feel scared, on edge, thrilled, but it didn't make me feel emotional. And I don't quite know why. I'm not quite sure why. It might be because, obviously, this Bruce Wayne is angry. He's angry about stuff that's happened to him. But we don't really see Bruce Wayne interacting with other people. I think the lack of emotion or heart that I found in this film might be to do with the way in which they use Bruce Wayne in this. Bruce Wayne is he's in it in a few scenes, and they are great scenes, but we don't get much of Bruce Wayne interacting with other people. In Christopher Nolan's Batman, we got the love interest with Rachel, and that was an aspect that humanized him when he wasn't Batman. A lot of the emotional interactions happen when he's Batman, so it's like a different version of him, and it's hard to really, you understand, like, I understood that this Bruce Wayne is angry and upset, but I didn't have anything to really attach to emotionally. Obviously, we didn't see his parents get killed. We just know it happened. And of course, it's kind of getting old now to see that happening. But there wasn't much else to sort of emotionally attach to. It was almost like, wow, this is great, but I don't know what I'm feeling, So there is a bit of a lack of emotion, maybe for the audience, especially for me, that I felt. Catwoman has a bit of an emotional arc, but for me it wasn't enough to fully bring me in and make me feel like, oh God, I'm scared for this person. I wasn't scared for anybody. I was thrilled. I was entertained. I was kind of afraid at some points. There were some real tense moments. We do see Bruce Wayne, but he's often on his own, or he's not saying anything, and really portrayed great. Like, Robert Pattinson's version of him is great, but just it's a little bit lacking in that way, because Batman has a lot to do in this film. But it is great. It is great. And yeah. So that's what I thought about the movie. I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's better than Christopher Nolan's Batman. It does a lot of things better. And then a few things it doesn't do as well. So I think it's a movie that fully deserves to sit by the side of all these other kind of legacy Batman iterations. It really does earn its place. And I'm really excited to see this again when I'm back in England soon. And I'm also excited to see if they do another one and what happens with that, because they've built a brilliant universe, a really grounded, and it's such a palate cleanser from the Marvel sort of overload that we've been having. This is a lot lighter on the CGI, which is very, very nice. And you've not got characters jumping off the bloody walls and flying around. These are real people in a real gritty world, and it's very enjoyable. So for that, I commend Matt Reeves. I commend the entire cast because it's an absolute achievement. So my rating overall for this film is 5 cups out of 5. I'm going to give this the maximum, because even though I've got criticisms of the length and of the emotion, I think that still isn't enough to bring it down for me. I still came out with a big smile on my face, and it did the things that I wanted it to do, and it surprised me multiple times. And to pull this off, to make a brand new Batman, and to commit to that length, to be brave enough to do that, and to commit to this very dark vision is an achievement, and I'm just very impressed. And the lack of emotion side can be addressed in a further one. It might just be the case of this is the setup. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe to see more. I will do another video once I'm back in the UK and I've got my setup. I'll talk more about the spoiler discussion. I can go in depth about the film. Yeah, so if you've seen the movie or you're excited to see it, please leave a comment down below. I want to see your thoughts and what you expect or what you thought. So thank you for watching. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off. Sam's Cup